Hello, are you there? Great. Uh, I'm a bit tired, but now we go to the last talk for the day, and I think Rick is much more tired than me because he flew here from Spain and had some issues with a flight, but he's awake enough to do his talk, and we're very grateful. Thank you for your talk.
Yes, no worries. I almost died there. That thing started tipping when I stepped on it. Yeah, so I missed my flight this morning, which is a bit shit. Can I swear on stream? I'm sure I can. We're good, right? I missed my flight because it was delayed, and then it was like a huge queue in front of the Lufthansa service center. And you get put into a hotel, a very nice hotel, by the way. But I was there at midnight, and I had to leave at 4:30 the next morning, so I didn't really get to enjoy it at all. Shame. Oh, yeah, a collective sigh. Well, it was a single person, but I'll just imagine it was a collective sigh. How are we doing? Oh, the crowd goes wild. No response. That's okay. I guess you're tired. I'm between you I'm between you and lunch. You and dinner. Oh my God, I'm tired. Holy shit. All right, let's get into decision making. Obviously, we're in the AI world now, so I figured let's ask our AI overlords to see what they have to say about this. Well, they replied like a true consultant, so nothing surprising there. Let's just assume that for now we're still making our own decisions. Can anyone tell me what this number means? Do you have any idea? Wow, oh my God, you're so smart. How did you know? What tipped you off, the title of the talk? Yeah, exactly. So, I'm sorry. Someone had to say it, right? No one else wanted to step up. Yeah, so this number, I mean, it's kind of it can't be an accurate number, right? It's kind of like made up, I guess. Well, maybe they thought about it, but 35,000 decisions a day is what they say. That sounds like quite a lot, but these are, I guess, macro decisions and sort of micro decisions. Like the macro decision being you deciding to come to this conference, and the micro decision maybe getting a drink, going to the toilet, or whatever. Now, in this presentation, I want to go a little bit into the sort of psychology of this decision-making process, and I want to give you a few techniques that can help you along the way. Does anyone know what model car this is? And don't say a red car. I will literally throw you out the building. A sports car, okay. I didn't get that one before, sorry? Expensive red car, okay. You're useless. Absolutely useless. It's a Corvette, okay? It's a Corvette. I actually don't know why I'm showing you this slide. I'm just kind of hoping to sort of manifest this car onto my driveway. I don't even have a driveway, so there's no point in doing that. But I do like driving cars. I drive cars to work every day. Cars, like I have multiple cars. I drive my car to work every day, even though I do live on cycling distance, which my colleagues can confirm. But I like driving. It's fun to do. Sort of gets my mind off things. I can switch from work mode to home mode, which is nice. Unless you have kids, then it's like work mode, car mode, and then whatever chaos mode that is. I don't have kids, so I'm lucky, I guess. But sometimes I arrive home and I'm like, how the heck did I get here? I don't actually remember driving. Anyone have that feeling before? You don't remember how you got there? Yeah, so there's actually a name for this, and it's called highway hypnosis. It's when you're sort of so in your own fantasy world, you're not actually thinking about what's happening right there, right then. That sounds quite dangerous. I mean, you're driving a car, right? You should be paying attention. But don't worry too much. You're still there's still certain triggers that'll alert you. If someone crosses the road, you're still going to be like, oh, I should probably brake. So don't be too worried. Now, this highway hypnosis can also be found in development. So anyone here ever felt flow state when you're developing? Yeah, you're so focused, you're so into your work That's when you get into flow state. But for a beginner developer, this is a very different experience. A beginner developer might still be very caught up on like, how do I write this piece of code? How do I, well, they might be thinking about syntax. They might be thinking about how do I convert this idea, this requirement that this client wrote down into actual machine code that's understandable. Whereas a more experienced developer already knows how to do the translation. They know, oh, I'm just going to use a for loop here because that's what I'm going to use. That's the most optimum way of doing this. I'm going to use a while loop there. I'm going to do it like this, like that, like sus, like sus. That's actually Dutch. Nice. I'm actually tired. This never happens. So obviously that's a very, very big difference. Now, has anyone ever read this book, Thinking Fast and Slow? Okay, I see 2 or 3 people raising their hands. If you read the book, then this will look familiar to you. You know where I'm going, right? So, in the book, Daniel Kahneman talks about 2 systems. We have our system 1, which is our intuitive system. It's fast, it's pretty effortless. It's basically our first response to certain things. When you're really good at something, that lives in your system 1. It becomes muscle memory. And your system 2 is your slow, conscious, and effortful system. This is where you actually have to exert mental energy to do something. And what your mind will do throughout the day is system 1, you will mostly operate in system 1. If you operate in system 2 constantly, you're going to be tired. You're going to be absolutely dead like me after a long day at work. But you mostly operate in system 1. And system 1 will give certain suggestions to your brain and be like, hey, I'm going to do this. And then system 2 is going to check those suggestions and be like, all right, that's a good idea. Now, if you imagine coming home from work and you're really tired, and maybe you get into an argument with your spouse, if you're really tired, it might be that your system 2 is not going to sort of interject when system 1 throws up a suggestion being like, hey, oh God, how do I say this nicely without saying anything weird? What do you do to your spouse when you're angry? Middle finger? I don't know. No suggestions from the crowd? No? Okay, good. Let's move on. But system 2 is not going to interject and be like, hey, that's not such a great idea. Let's just realize you're tired and take your spouse's feelings into account as well. And a beginner developer will very much be operating in that system 2. They spend a lot more time there thinking consciously about the things that they're doing. Just like driving a car. When you're driving a car and you've been doing it for so many hours, you know what to do. But when you're a beginner, you'll get into the car and you'll be like, okay, clutch, then let go of the gas slowly, you gotta put in the first gear, you don't want to stall the car, then you arrive at your destination, you forget to put it into neutral, you let go of the clutch and you stall the car. That ever happened to anyone? Okay, good. Some people deny that ever happened. If you deny it, you're a liar. So how can we help this? It's kind of hard to just tell people like, hey, just become more experienced, right? If you're more experienced, it's easier to deal with these things. That's not really a good solution. So what we can do is we can introduce standards. We can help people by making sure there's already a path for them to follow. Let's say you're driving and there are no traffic rules. That sounds like a fun time, right? You're approaching a crossing and then suddenly a car is coming from the right side and you're like, do I give way? Do I take way? I don't actually know what to do. It becomes a very tiresome activity where you have to constantly guess and sort of estimate what people are doing. And that becomes very, very tiresome. So standards actually help developers sort of get rid of those annoying decisions you have to make and create space for the more important decisions. Like, what is this change going to, how is this change going to impact the rest of the code base? And I'm not talking about just like simple standards like, oh, code style and stuff like that. I'm also talking about architectural standards. How do you solve certain problems? What kind of sort of naming conventions do you use? This really helps beginner developers get on their way and not have to worry so much about every little character they type. Let's move on to something more serious. What do these two people have in common? Sorry? Walking while talking. Is Peter Griffin talking? Glasses? Wow, yeah, they do both have glasses. I keep forgetting Peter Griffin has glasses. Like, you can't really tell. It's just his eyes. The only way you can tell is by this little thing and that. Otherwise, I would be convinced it's just eyes. Anyone else? They're both fictional characters. Well, Steve Jobs did exist at some point. I hate to break it to you. What I'm trying to get at, is that they both wear the same clothes each and every day. And the reason they did it, well, the reason why Steve Jobs did it, I don't know why Peter Griffin did it. I guess the cartoonist is just lazy. But the reason why Steve Jobs did it is to prevent something called decision fatigue. And decision fatigue is when you make so many decisions throughout the day that you sort of just become tired because you end up spending so much time in your system too. Now, I'm not suggesting that everyone here starts wearing the same clothes every day, because, I mean, do we have a Steve Jobs in the house here? Anyone that rich and that famous and that? I thought that person was raising his hand, but he was just pointing somewhere. He doesn't even know what I'm talking about. That's okay, don't worry. So I'm not suggesting you wear the same clothes every day, but what I am suggesting is that you realize that when you're tired, you're not the best decision maker. I want you to realize that when you're tired and your boss asks you a question, or your colleague, or your client, or whoever it is, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm tired. Let's just sleep on it. Let's sleep on it, and I'll give you an answer tomorrow. That's probably a better way than just diving into it, be like, all right, I'll give you a reply now, because that decision is probably not the best decision of your life. Speaking of good decisions versus bad decisions, let's go back to our little driving experiment. We have traffic rules again, don't worry. We're driving, we see a green light, and we decide to continue driving, but someone else hits us from the side. Does that make the decision to continue driving a good decision or a bad decision? Who thinks that was a bad decision? Who thinks that was a good decision? Most people, right. So the quality of the decision is not so much determined by the outcome, but by the information you have at that point, right? When I was in the car, I could see the light was green, which tells me that it should be fine to go. Now, what if the light was red and I decided to go? Was that a good decision or a bad decision? Bad. I'm so happy you said that. I don't know how German people drive with lights and stuff. You guys go crazy fast on the highway. But yeah, so that's a bad decision, right? So what if the light was green, but suddenly you get hit by a piano from the sky? Good decision, bad decision? Good decision? Bad decision? Yeah, okay. Could that person have done anything else to make sure that they're better informed making that decision? Not really. It's kind of hard. You don't really expect a piano to fall from the sky, right? It's kind of an odd situation, so no. But what is good to realize that is when you make a decision, make sure you make a decision, and in the context of coding, make sure you code for change. And what I mean by that is use your design patterns. And we already use a very nice one in Silverstripe, one of them being the adapter pattern. And we use it because we're using Fly System. Right? Fly System is integrated into Silverstripe, and Fly System allows us to quickly change out adapters for which file system we're going to use. So if we decide to go with some Azure file storage, or if we decide to go with some Google Cloud or just a local file system, we can easily swap these adapters out, which is really nice. That allows us to pivot from, let's say, a decision that turns out to be not the greatest decision. Same goes for hexagonal architecture. Anyone here knows what hexagonal architecture is? I can't even speak. No hands? So, okay, well, I encourage you to look it up. It's not super relevant in the Silverstripe space, but it sort of creates a structure where you isolate your business logic into its own little layer, and basically abstracting away parts of the framework. So that allows you to still change out all the infrastructural things and the framework things without touching the actual business logic of your application. Another perfect example, which is a talk that was given earlier, Rector. Rector is great because it allows you to pivot easily. You don't have to worry about, I have to refactor this entire code base again to go this way, to go that way. You can use Rector to automate a lot of things. making it a very good tool to prepare for change. So let's make this a little bit more concrete. Let's go into some decision-making techniques. Now, full disclosure, I do not use this method every single time. I use it when I feel a bit lost, but I'm not too sure which steps to go through. So, the 7 steps to effective decision-making. First one, identify the decision. Should we refactor this piece of code? Next, gather relevant information. This could be some interesting code metrics, maybe some cyclomatic complexity and other fun little numbers that make no sense to some people, or it could be what kind of business value does this code add to the company. Identify alternatives. As programmers, we have sort of like a programmer intuition, which is actually really good. This is our system 1, right? Our system 1, we're so trained in doing certain things. Our system 1 will throw up a suggestion, and most of the time, it'll be correct. It'll be the best way to go. But I encourage you to identify alternatives. Try to go for that second and third alternative. Maybe you think of a better idea. Then weigh the evidence. Figure out which alternative works best. You choose among the alternatives. You go ahead and take action, so you implement your action. And then 7, which is one that we don't often do. We do have retrospectives, right? But those are sort of process related. We don't really necessarily go into code retrospectives very often, technical retrospectives. So 7, review your decision and its consequences. And you can learn a lot from doing this. So I encourage you to really look at number 7 here. No more pictures being made? Perfect. Another one. Pre-mortem. This is actually from the Daniel Kahneman book, so some people will recognize this. Gary Klein, he's an expert in naturalistic decision-making. That means decision-making in a normal environment, normal circumstances, etc. And he proposes, before a formal decision is made, imagine we are a year into the future. We implemented the plan as it now exists. The outcome was a disaster. Please take 5 to 10 minutes to write a brief history of that disaster. This really unleashes sort of like a creative destruction in some people. This really works well for some people, and it does not work whatsoever for some other people. But there are some people this works great at, and those are the people who are usually the ones that are very pessimistic about things. They always see problems in certain solutions. People recognize, did anyone have those in their team? Or do you not dare to raise your hand? Okay, that's my team. Who? Never mind. I don't want to know. I think we all recognize that person, right? They always see something wrong or some very unlikely possibility something could go wrong. But these people are extremely valuable. They might be annoying sometimes, but they're extremely valuable because they can really sort of dive into everything that could possibly go wrong. And you can sort of go through these options and be like, all right, so what's the actual probability of this happening? So pre-mortem, very, very fun exercise. It should take half an hour, unless you have people who talk too much, then an hour, 2 hours, whatever. No one laughed there. They all feel, is he talking about me? Decision-making within the team. A couple years ago, I worked on a project for a telecom provider. It was a very big project. We were sort of at the center of this landscape that we were building. And I think like a year, maybe 2 years into the project, the lead developer at the time got sick, and they needed a replacement. I wasn't very experienced at the time. I hadn't been a lead before at that point. But I stepped forward and I took over his role. Wow! Suddenly, I had to make a lot of decisions. That was pretty insane time for me, and it was kind of overwhelming. You don't really know how to deal with all of these things. People coming up to you, be like, all right, Rick, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do now? And you're like, I don't know. But what we decided on was creating a decision-making framework. And this really helped lay down a nice foundation that everyone could rely on. Suddenly, we sort of had like guidelines and standards. So our decision-making framework looked a little bit like this. First, decide who is responsible for the final decision, usually the lead. This person is responsible for making sure that a decision is made. They don't have to necessarily make the decision, like they don't have to think of the solution, but they have to make sure they facilitate the team and make sure people gather enough information, consider the right things, and get to a conclusion that's useful. 2, give them pseudo rights. The frick does that mean? So, I don't mean literally pseudo rights on the machine, but so like sudo, if you're familiar with Linux, it's super user do. It's like the highest elevation of privileges. And what I mean by this is give them the right to pseudo merge something. Give them the right that when there's a merge request or a pull request or however you want to name it, and there's a discussion between two developers, because developers like discussions for some reason, that person can pseudo merge something and be like, all right, I understand you guys are arguing about this, but making a decision sometimes is so much more important than the whole argument, and whether it's A or B, it doesn't really matter. We just need to move on. We need to move on from this sort of analysis paralysis, right? So I give them pseudo rights and make sure everyone agrees, which that would be nice, right? Otherwise it gets into another argument. I mean, make sure everyone agrees that person has pseudo rights. That's what I meant. Third, a decision is easier made with 3 developers than with 2. Like I mentioned before, developers like to argue sometimes. So when there's 2 developers, it might be side A and side B. And that can be very annoying because they might be very stuck in their side. So what we said is, all right, as soon as something goes back and forth once, let's make sure you call on a 3rd developer. So the 3rd developer can hopefully not come up with a side C. It can actually pick side A or side B. And we had a consensus. It was like, all right, this is how we do it. If that developer picks side A, then side A it is. If that developer comes up with a side C, then I guess we need to talk about this in a bigger setting and make this a proper meeting. 4th, as a lead, involve others into the decision to create support. In Dutch, we have a nice word called draagvlak. And then a support, I don't know, it doesn't really have the same sort of impact for me. But what I mean is it's really important to have everyone involved in the process of making that decision. Have them know the things that are considered. Have them have a say in what's going to be decided. Because if you do that, it's going to be a lot easier to implement things because they feel a lot more involved. They actually feel like it's a group effort. We all thought of this. We all came to this conclusion. Now let's all implement this. Helps a lot. And 5, create a shared technical vision and reiterate it often. Steve Jobs always repeated the same message. I'm not an Apple fan, but it sounds like I'm an Apple fan. I'm not an Apple fan. I don't idolize Steve Jobs or anything. But if we talk about leaders, they do have the tendency to reiterate the same message over and over and over and over and over again. And that has a pretty interesting effect where some people just need it. Some people need to hear this continuously repeated. Now, for a technical vision, this can be very useful as well. If you have a clear goal, if you have this nice dot on the horizon, and people know that when they are here and they need to make a decision, they know they're better off making a decision that goes this way than going that way. And this creates autonomy. That's the word. This creates autonomy within your team. And autonomy is very nice if you want to stay productive. Let's talk about, this quote. This is a quote by a great leader. He said, it's a lead developer's job not to decide, but to facilitate the decision. Be a facilitator. So let's talk about something sexy. Documenting decisions. So everyone likes documenting, right? No, okay. I guess you don't like documenting. No, but documenting decisions is actually really useful. I did it a while ago for a project. I was like, okay, so this is a new project. We're basically greenfield here. I can do whatever I want, sort of. But let's actually document this process. So what I did is I created a decisions.md in my repository. And I just started writing down, okay, this is why I picked GraphQL. This is why I picked Symfony. This is why I did this. This is why I did that. And at the time, I didn't think too much of it. But then a year later, I ran into some issues. And I was like, why the hell did I went for this package? Why did I make this decision? And then I looked at the decision.md and I was like, okay, because at the time, that's all there was. That's the only package I could use. It's really difficult to sort of go back in time and think like, this is what the ecosystem looked like a year ago. it's almost impossible, right? So documenting these decisions is really, really useful. One way of doing this is by using ADRs, which is architectural decision records. This is just a random template. So basically, you have a title, you have a status, and I'll go ahead and crouch. Oh God, is this going to work? Where's my mouse? There it is. A status, you have context, the decision you're making, and the consequences. Now this is one of the templates you can use. You can go to adr.github. I'll get rid of the mouse, don't worry. Calm down, calm down. I know it's annoying. Nothing worse than seeing the presenter's mouse on the screen. So you can go to adr.github.io, and there's a bunch of different templates there you can use. But I really, really hope that when you walk away from this talk, that this is one of the things you'll take away. Please document your decisions. So let's add them to our decision-making framework. Document your decisions using ADRs. Now, I was just checking the time here. I have until 5. Should I continue or should I stop? Okay. It would have been very awkward if you're like, no, let's go away, stop. I want food. This is boring, it sucks. Okay. Sorry. A little self-deprecation, can't hurt anyone. So let's talk about chess. Do I have any chess players in the room here? Ooh, there's a few. Nice, okay, cool. So, for those who don't know chess, in chess you have 3 game phases. You have your opening, where you sort of create a comfortable position for yourself. You move forward some pawns, you develop your pieces a little bit. Nothing too exciting happens there, although it is the most deciding part of the game, but whatever. And then you have your mid-game, in which maybe you capture some pieces, you create some attacks, or maybe you increase your defenses. And then you have your end game, where things like checkmate, or if you're not the best chess player, stalemate, come into play. Now in chess, well, in competitive chess, you also have something called a clock. Oh my God, a clock. That sounds familiar. So chess players have to deal with something called time management. Both chess players have a set amount of time to do their moves. And this time management is actually very crucial in chess. Because they have to know when to invest time into making the right decision. You don't want to be left with too much time in the end, because you probably could have used it in the beginning or in the middle of the game, and vice versa. But then how do you know when to invest more time into making a decision? When do you invest more time into thinking which move are you going to do? This is where recognizing critical moments come into play. You have to recognize when the move you're about to do is very, very important to the rest of your position, to the rest of the game. And this is something that we also run into when developing. Of course, we're dealing with deadlines. Is there anyone here who doesn't deal with deadlines? I was going to say, tell me your secret. I want to know. No one raised their hand. Okay, fair enough. We have to deal with time management as well, right? We have to know where do we invest time into thinking out certain structures. Like, you don't want to go waterfall and think about everything. You want to stay agile. But when do you invest that time? And the way we know that is by starting to recognize critical moments. But the tricky part is that the critical moment is usually earlier than you expect it to be. For example, in chess, when you do a move and then you lose a piece, you might think, oh, that was the critical moment. But it could be a few moves before that, because a few moves before that, you started getting yourself into a position that ended up losing you that piece. You could have had a better decision. If you have a good position, then there are very, very few bad moves to make. But how do you train this? How do you actually practice? How do you become better at this time management and this recognizing critical moments? How do you think chess players do it, the top athletes in the world? They practice. How do they practice? Sorry? Repeating, yes. But also, have you noticed that chess players keep track of the moves? Yeah, they keep track of their moves, even though most chess players can play the game again from memory afterwards, but they keep track of their moves, and then they analyze it afterwards. and they sometimes do that with someone of equal skill level, or maybe even their opponent, and they go through the game and they go through each move and they're like, all right, was this an important move? Was this a game-changing move, yes or no? And this really develops their skill to recognize critical moments. Do we do that as developers? Have you ever gone back into your code and be like, how did this get here? When did it start? You know that feeling when you have like a class and then suddenly extra behavior gets added onto it, and then you're like, whoa, that's not supposed to be there. Now it's doing a lot of different weird things. But that could be because you named the class wrong the first time you created it. So what we can do as developers is we can do something called technical retrospectives, which is what I referred to earlier on. You can do retrospectives, but make sure they have a technical point of view. You can do this by simply going through the code and finding sort of complicated pieces of code, or something that you're not too happy about, or something that creates a lot of bugs, or maybe something that has a high churn rate, which is where the same file is being changed over and over and over and over again, which could indicate that it's just not great code. And doing this activity, it's not so much what comes out of that, it's not so much the answers that you get from it, but it's the activity. It's the fact that you're doing it, is you're training your brain to recognize these critical moments and making sure that next time you'll spot them sooner and you'll be able to tackle them earlier. Another thing you can use is PHP metrics. This sort of allows you to go through all the different complexities, all the different relationships between your classes, and you can do this by also, in your Git history, going back in time and seeing how the complexity of your code base grows, and when does it become complicated, and when does something get out of hand. Some things to think about. So, takeaways. First, experience. Training your system 1, more space in your system 2 to think about more complex problems, rather than just, how do I translate this into machine code? Or what for a while loop do I use? 2, 7 steps to effective decision making. If you feel lost, you can just resort to this sort of tool, and at least you'll know that you've went through all the correct steps to get to a conclusion. 3, create a decision-making framework within your team. Make sure everyone agrees that this is how we do it, and this creates a lot more continuity. 4, document your decisions using ADRs. It can be very simple, it can be very complex if you want it to be, but just at least make that decision.md in your project today or tomorrow. That's a good start. And 5, analyze previously written code and get better at recognizing those critical moments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. Very interesting. I read Kahneman, and I also saw a talk about Kahneman, but I never saw a code with Kahneman and code. And it's really good. Everyone is a bit tired because I think conferences are no places for many decisions. You just follow the lead and follow to the ship and go back and let you rush you. So I give you some time, but first I want to thank Rick and all other speakers, because it was a really great schedule until now, and that's not something I did, that's something the speakers did. Thank you very much.